Thank you for joining Cancer Support Community Atlanta for this program. Please visit our website, cscatlanta.org, for a complete list of live and recorded events. We invite you to sign up for our newsletter to stay connected to all future programs.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. As she said, I'm Kip. I am a registered dietitian, and I have spent my whole career not working in clinical care with patients, but actually working in food service at Emory University Hospital. So, but honestly, most of my cooking skills I gained just by practicing and trial and error and self-taught figuring stuff out at home. I have never professionally cooked in a kitchen. I've worked in a lot of restaurants. But yeah, so I guess I share that to say you too can figure all of this stuff out and practice and learn. So what we are doing today is actually a recipe. So Chef Mike is a colleague of mine. I've worked with him for over a decade, and we do a lot of recipe development together. And so what we're sharing with you today is a lentil taco recipe that we developed to try to give a little bit more shine to the very humble lentil, which is kind of sort of like a plain, bland, healthy for you food. And we thought it would be fun to make it a little zhuzhed up a little bit rather than just your standard health food store hot bar lentil soup sort of vibe. We've got a walnut lentil taco that's got a nice crispy fresh slaw with it. And then we're also going to make a coconut lime rice pudding. So when we were thinking about something else to go with this, rice pudding has a tradition in Latin America for sure, and is often made with milk and cinnamon, raisins sometimes. So today's variation is going to be made with oat milk and coconut milk and lime, and then we'll switch over to start doing the taco filling and make the slaw, and then we'll come back. So to get us started, I also want to mention that because we are having a little social worker soiree this afternoon, I'm going to be doubling the recipe from what's in front of you so that we have some leftovers. So if it looks like I'm making more than what you think I'm making, I am. All right, so to get started, let's talk a little bit about rice. With rice pudding, any kind of rice is great. The also great thing about this recipe is there's a note at the bottom. If you can make rice pudding with cooking from uncooked raw rice, or you can use leftover rice. And some people actually even like that a little bit better and like the texture that they get from the leftover rice. Also, we have white jasmine rice today. If you are wanting to get some more fiber and do brown rice, go for it. It's going to take a little bit longer to cook, but definitely a great option for you. And then, whatever flavor you like. The jasmine has, people say it's like fragrant, and I would agree with that, but I would say, it's subtle in its fragrance. We're just going to go ahead, and this is just dump it all in sort of thing. It also, come on now, behave. All right, so when you're cooking rice for a recipe and you want it to be fluffy, then it's a really good idea to soak and rinse the rice because you get some of that starch off. For today, you can soak in advance if you want. It's going to help things cook a little bit faster. But if you don't, it's also not a big deal. Because we want that starchiness to add the sort of creaminess to it. So we are just going to put everything together here. It's my first time using this stove, so let's see if I can remember how to make it work. And just like that. Okay, does it normally make that sound?
Does it normally make that sound? Yeah, it does.
Okay. Cool.
Kip and I are new. We're learning together.
Right, yeah, here we go. All right.
And it should warm up really quickly.
Yeah, cool. And we might even smell a little toastiness on this rice, which I was just thinking like, oh, that's a fun also thing that I like to do sometimes with grains. So like with oatmeal or with a lot of different grains, if you get them in the pan first and get a little toastiness going on, it just adds another like dynamic to the flavor. So you don't want to, you know, burn it, obviously. But if it gets just a little like sort of toastiness to it, it's kind of a nice oats, bulgur, what else? Wheat berries, any sort of grain that you're cooking if you want to just give a little toast in the pan. The other thing I like to do is if you want those grains to be fluffy, is I'll toast them in a little bit of fat, because then that fat's going to coat all of those grains individually and you'll get a little bit more fluff going on. So we're going to it's getting hot. We're going to give it a little more juice. Oh wait, I have to press the button and then do the thing. Okay. I got this. Have you guys had rice pudding before? Yeah? Please ask.
So, I make rice pudding quite often.
Yeah.
But I don't get the same flavor with cooked rice versus rice cooked in the milk.
Okay. So flavor or texture?
Huh?
What's your preference?
What's my preference?
Uh-huh.
Like, I would like to use cooked rice.
Uh-huh. But you don't like it as much?
But the taste is not the same. It's
Yeah.
definitely quicker, no doubt about it.
Sure.
But when I'm eating that, I'm always comparing to the better one.
Okay. That's interesting. So I was reading up on some methods and the particular, there we go. So we got just a tiny little, and it smells like rice, right? It shouldn't smell, when we say it, that's why when people say things are fragrant sometimes in food, it's like, it's subtle. It's subtle. So yeah, anyway, the recipe reviewer that I was reading, his particular preference was the cooked rice. I've done it both ways. I like it both ways. So if you like it cooked from raw, then don't change anything.
No. I guess my question is, when you use cooked rice,
Uh-huh.
or rather, when I use cooked rice, it seems that it doesn't get the flavors in it. It's more in the milk and not in the rice. And I'm definitely very picky. I'll raise my hand for that. But do you not find that difference when you do that?
I think you still have to, I think the tendency, I wonder, could be to not cook it as long with cooked rice. You still need to go real slow and low, right? Because to get it, the flavor-wise where you want it, you need the time, right?
That's exactly
And so I think if you're just sort of saying like, okay, this is already cooked, so I don't have to go as long, you might have to go as long, but you still need to give it time. Otherwise, it's just rice that's already cooked, you're right, kind of soaking in milk and hasn't.
milk of some sort.
Exactly. So I would say just because you're using cooked rice, I would say you're not going to cut the time in half. Right? I would say you're going to maybe shave 25% off.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. And then we are going to add some sugar. It says push. Ah, look at that. We're learning as we go with ingredients and new spaces. All right, so it's going to look like a lot of sugar. Remember, I'm doubling this. The other thing that we're doing today, and again, I will say when you're talking about rice pudding, traditional is milk, and that's totally fine. And whatever kind of milk you like, also totally fine. Plant-based milk, great. What I'm doing today is some coconut milk and then some coconut cream, just for an extra sort of richness to it. Specifically thinking about when we're in an active treatment state with cancer and we're just trying to pack in calories when and where we can, sometimes getting people to eat something a little more luxurious and a little more calorically dense can be tricky. So when you can find those opportunities to sort of turn up the caloric density a little bit, this is one way to do that. All right, and then we're going to add a little bit of vanilla. No, I didn't bring my little measuring spoon. Here we go.
Is vanilla extract something that needs to be measured exactly, or?
No. So in baking, there's a teaspoon. In baking, it tends to be a little bit more exacting because those recipes are more, specific. But and I think sometimes I think I spent a long time thinking like there can't be too much vanilla, right? But I've found some. I'm trying to think of an example. One place where I have found too much vanilla is actually in making applesauce. I think it almost dulls down the sort of sharpness. I like a little bit in there sometimes if I'm making my own applesauce. But yeah, that's one place where I think. But no, I mean, sometimes with baking recipes, the recipe tester has sort of gotten into that like sweet spot. And I usually say the first time you're making a recipe, if you're not really familiar, it's, follow the recipe that first time and then go off on your own. But I will also say that, okay, so I'll say to do that, but then I'll also say I don't always do that because it depends on the source of the recipe, right? Like sometimes you can look at a recipe and be like, because the internet is chock full of mediocre and bad recipes, right? So, oh, you know what I just realized? I did not put enough. I only put 2 cups in here. We need more. So your ratio for rice pudding, it says there, is in general, it's a lot of milk to rice because we really want that sort of like you want enough liquid in there for it to be able to hang out and spend a lot of time soaking everything up. And you're going to get some evaporation as well. So 6-to-1 if you're going with uncooked rice, 4-to-1 if you're going with cooked rice. There we go. I'm just going to polish that off. Look at that. Rice pudding is also one of those things that's super forgiving. Because, if you just need it to be less soupy, cook it longer. Also, it's going to, if you're going to refrigerate it, some people like the rice pudding hot, some people like it cold. If you're going to refrigerate it, it's going to thicken up a little bit. Those rice grains are going to continue to suck up the liquid. And so if you want to get it back to that perfect consistency again, just adding a little bit of cold milk and stirring it up will do the trick. All right, so we're going to save the lime. My thing with cooking lime is, in general, I find that you want to save it until the end because lime can get bitter sometimes when you cook it. So when I'm adding zest or juice, with lime, I tend to finish it. So we'll let this cook. It was up to a boil, and we want it just at a real low simmer, and it's just going to hang out here for a while. All right. Get all this stuff done and out of the way. You guys know the wet paper towel trick to keep your cutting board from slipping around? Or wet towel, or even just plain towel if your cutting board is the kind that slides around on your nice slick counter. Throw a little something underneath there. There you go. Washcloth, paper towel, whatever you have helps anchor it. I didn't even set these up today, but yeah, I already like that. All right, so we're going to switch over to lentil taco. All right, so this recipe, we actually entered a recipe contest for hospital, a plant-based recipe contest for hospitals, I don't know, maybe in 2019 or so, and entered this recipe, and it was a finalist, so that was fun. And so, yeah, Chef Mike and I developed this recipe together, and our process sometimes, often our process when we're developing recipes together is we will sit in an office or wherever we are, conference room, and we will sort of come up with the idea and we'll start writing it as if like, okay, what do we think we want in it? Okay, and then how much of these things do we want? And I'm usually the typer, and I'll start typing until I get stuck, and then I'll be like, okay, now I'm stuck, what do you think? And then he'll keep talking, and we'll do it that way. And then he will take everything to the kitchen and try it, and then I'm the taster. And I'll say, okay, wait, it's still a little, the thing about lentils, right, is they're very, very starchy, and we wanted something that had sort of a kind of toothsome feel to it, right? A little chew, a little bite. And so the sun-dried tomatoes, I think, were our first choice. I can't remember exactly if we talked about adding the nut right away or not. I'm from the South, so pecan is always my go-to. He's from Pennsylvania. I guess they have more walnuts up there or something. He tends to go walnut. I let him have it this time. You could do either. We're going to turn this down a little bit. For this kind of mushroom, yes. This is just a cremini mushroom, which is actually a little baby portobello mushroom. Hasn't grown up all the way. Sometimes you'll see them labeled that way in the store, baby bella. You could do this with a plain white button mushroom if you wanted to. The only mushrooms that I don't use the stems, exactly, with a caveat. Shiitake mushrooms, those stems are chewy. However, I don't ever throw them away. I save them. Boom, boom. Sorry, that was just, it's going a little bit more than I wanted to. So yes, for these, it's tender. The texture is the same as this part. Shiitake mushrooms. I take the stems off. I save them. I let them dry in a bowl or on a sheet pan or something. Takes a couple days for them to dry out, and then I just put them in my pantry. And then they can be turned into mushroom stock as a replacement for, any sort of stock. You just put them in water. Boiling water, let them soak in there for a little while, strain it out, and you have this really rich, delicious mushroom flavored liquid that, to be honest, if you're just feeling kind of crummy, sprinkle some salt in there and sip on it. It is delicious. It's kind of like a tea, broth, sort of, whatever. If I'm feeling crummy, tea is fine, but like, sipping on chicken broth or mushroom broth, I find to be very comforting. So yeah, I save my shiitake stems for that. You can also throw them in your freezer if you don't want shiitake stems sitting on your counter for several days, because they always just seem like they're in the way for a while. Because you also want to make sure that they're not like bunched up in a bowl like this, because they'll get moldy. You want them to have some air to breathe. But once they're all the way dry, just put them in the pantry and they can stay there for months and months and months. So yeah, another thing you could do if you're like, oh my gosh, she's been chopping mushrooms forever, I don't think I could stand there and chop mushrooms forever, is you can chuck them in your food processor and mince them up. And that'll give you want to just pulse though. You don't want to end up with like a completely ground up meal. But yeah, I would chuck them in there, give them a couple pulses. You can honestly do the same with the onion. It's kind of the over-under thing as far as, do I want to clean the food processor or do I want to stand here and chop things? And that is a choose-your-own-adventure situation. I can't tell you how you feel today. I'm going to let that pan get a little bit hot. Put this over to the side. Okay, so when it comes to mushrooms, I have a lot of opinions about the way they are cooked. These are all just my own personal opinions. If you disagree with them, that is A-okay. You do whatever you like to do with your mushrooms. But I do not like flabby mushrooms. I think the beauty of a mushroom, and I'm never going to eat a raw mushroom. That's like eating styrofoam to me. Again, if you like eating raw mushrooms, you do you. But to me, the beauty and the flavor of mushrooms comes out when you get that like browning on them, right? All right, so now we're getting hot in here. So we are going to add a fair amount of olive oil because these mushrooms are gonna soak it up. I don't have the measuring. This will rinse real quick. It won't be a big deal. Again, it looks like a lot. We are making a lot of this, so that's why we're going big. Just gonna sizzle a little bit in there because there's maybe like a speck of oat milk in there. All right. All right, so mushrooms. I like them to get that brown flavor because that's where the really like meaty, umami flavors come out. And how you get that is by leaving them alone. That's the other thing. My husband in particular, his favorite thing to make is stir fry because he gets to stand there and stir it. And I'm like, don't touch my mushrooms. They're browning. So I'm gonna give them a stir once, you know, to get everything kind of coated. And then I'm gonna leave them be. Because mushrooms, even though they feel dry, of course contain a ton of water. They're like sponges. So they're gonna soak up this oil, but they also let off, once you cook them, a ton of liquid. And if you really, right now, what's happening at first is they're just steaming, right? Because they're gonna, in very short order, be sitting in a ton of liquid. And you can even see, you know, already in there that they're getting shiny, and that's partially from the oil, but like they're gonna be soupy in a little while. And so what you want is all of that liquid in there you want them to let it go, and then you want a lot of it to evaporate, and then what you're left is that like concentrated, toasty flavor. So we're gonna let that hang out. We're gonna toss a little bit of salt in here now, and that's gonna help them on their journey to releasing their tasty liquid. All right, so while that's cooking, then you give your mushrooms a head start. I almost always, here's a thing, here's a way I often ignore recipes, is if they tell me to do onions and garlic and then the mushrooms, I'm like, nope, I'm gonna reverse it. I also like having a trash bowl. There's like trash cans around here, but I like having my compost bin or my trash bowl or something close by. All right, so onions. Everybody's got their own like favorite preferred way to chop onions. And I think I learned a similar way to Chef Mike, which is leave the outside on so you have a handle, right? Now, the step that he does that I don't do is to slice it this way. And the reason I don't do that is because it seems a little unnecessary, and also if you're not confident, dangerous. So I just slice it this way. Oh, yep, for sure. And the lentils, yep, we'll get those out of the way. We good now? Okay. All right, where was I? I'm about halfway through. All right, so I don't do that extra slicey way because it seems unnecessary to me. So I'm just going sort of kind of in a rainbow, right? Like starting sort of sideways and then going in an arch and then across. And now you've got a nice, relatively even dice. And there we are. Now, if you want to mince, right, you can just go from here a little bit further and give them extra love, right, if you need it smaller from there. If you of course, want them bigger, then make your slices more far apart. Excuse me. All right, so what's going on? Oh, we're starting to get some good browning action on here. That's where the flavor's at. My rice pudding is slowed down a little bit. There we go. I brought it up to a boil first. So whatever on your oven, you can just get it right on up to high. And then, again, every stovetop is different. So you kind of have to find the sweet spot. I need a different stirring. Here we go. For you. And again, if I'm cooking rice for, a side dish or something like that and I want it fluffy, I'm not going to touch it. I'm going to put a lid on it. I'm going to leave it alone. I'm going to not disturb it because I don't want it giving off too much starch and getting sticky with its neighbors. But in this situation, we want it creamy. We want all that starch out there, so we're going to give it a stir fairly regularly. Yeah, so it does do that a little bit for sure. We just stir it in. Yep. Okay. All right, mushrooms, you guys were looking happy. I'm stirring them only as much as, I want them, the ones on top, to get down to the bottom so that they can get toasty and brown. All right. All right, so yeah, so you can see sort of we'll get that little friend back in there. It's a little, every onion, it sort of takes some trial and error because you don't want to get it all the way to the root. You want to sort of keep everything intact. And then, of course, make sure you're keeping those fingers out of the way. There we go. All right. We're going to get that added in there. Mm-hmm. So probably what I would do if you're a little wanting it to be less mushroomy is you can certainly up the lentil ratio, but I would also look at upping the walnuts and the sun-dried tomatoes, because if it ends up with too high of a ratio of just lentils, it's going to feel mushy, right? And you want it to feel meatier, you want it to have some chew to it. The other thing I would say is if you throw those mushrooms in a food processor and really cook them down, it's going to seem like a completely different beast on the other side of this. And it's not going to be like mushroom forward flavor. You may find. We shall see. But yeah, the other thing I would say is today we're using red lentils, which are great, and they add a really nice, like, pretty color to it. Brown lentils are really common. They would work here. I'd be less inclined to use those. If you can find the little black beluga, they're called beluga lentils, or like black caviar lentils sometimes, or the French green lentils. Both of those are more compact and more sort of like outside to inside starchy ratio is different, if that makes any sense, like the outside skin of them is higher.
So for this one, maybe any lentil, but brown?
You can use the brown. I would just say if you're really thinking about turning down the mushroom amount, you want to make sure that I would maybe choose a more like a green or a black lentil.
You're just talking about color, though, not flavor.
No, I'm talking about flavor. Yeah.
And you don't have to soak.
No, you don't. That's what's so lovely about, and actually, and I'm already thinking in the future about, we were talking earlier about bean cookery. Depending on people, and people got big opinions about cooking beans from dry. And I've done it all the ways. but I almost never soak my beans anymore because I can't plan ahead that far. I can plan ahead same day. I can't often plan ahead night before. It's just not how my life works. No. Mm-mm. It's not going to hurt if you remember to soak them. It's great. It does cut down the cooking time a little bit. I just often don't remember. I also partially work from home, so it's pretty easy for me to, and this is with regular beans, like with lentils, they'll cook in 20 minutes or so, and these even faster. That's probably why we have those here today. But yeah, you can cook them from completely out of the pantry. I'm just starting dinner to dinner on the table in 30 minutes or so. Yeah, so when cooking any kind of dry beans, I have been I used to pressure cook them, which is, or Instant Pot or whatever. That was a way I did it same day. I've found that depending on the bean, they kind of get unevenly cooked. So my favorite method is actually to throw them in the oven in a covered pan. Now, it takes several hours, but if I can remember that at 3 in the afternoon when my kids are getting home from school, then we're still good for dinner time. All right, rice pudding, you're bubbling. I hear you, I see you, I haven't forgotten you. You smell delicious. Wonderful. All right, okay, so next thing, we've gotten our mushrooms in here, we've gotten our onions in here, we've gotten our garlic in here. A little bit of salt in there already. I'll probably add, let another pinch or so. Next thing is going to be our dry spices. Chili powder and cumin are what we are using. Whenever I cook with dry spices, I always like to put them in the pan with whatever aromatics I've started with before adding any liquid, because it just sort of toasts them, just like similar concept to the mushrooms, right? It kind of wakes them up. And it's even been opened before. So, because we're doubling the recipe, we're going to do 2 tablespoons of each of these. All right. And that's where things are really going to start smelling good in here. There we go. All right, so yeah, and I would say, it's going to start feeling sort of like dry on the bottom, and that's what we want, right? Everything's getting sort of soaked up. You don't want your spices to burn, but again, there's enough mushrooms and onions in here and liquid still. But, I would give them a good minute or so. The other thing, it's not on your recipe, but since Chef Mike bought it, because he said he uses both sometimes, he did my grocery shopping for me today, is I'm going to add a little squirt of tomato paste. The other thing I like to do with tomato paste, same thing as with dry spices, is I like to caramelize it, get it in the pan first. All these things just sort of like turn the flavor up a good bit. So, I don't know, we're going to use a tablespoon or so. Actually, we're going to use 2. Since we're doubling. So you can do this with the tomato paste. You can do this with just the sun-dried tomatoes. What do you guys do with tomato paste when you only need 1 tablespoon and you open that can? Freeze it. So when you freeze it, talk to me about how you're freezing it. Are you just putting it in a container? I've seen so many different little. In a bag. That's actually one of my favorite methods because I saw in a cooking magazine one time, if you put it in a Ziploc bag and then you kind of like smush it all flat and then like run your finger through it, it's almost like in little individual tablespoons already. I've honestly found that you can just break it off, right? If it's in a bag, I think that's really easy because versus a Tupperware container or something like that. You can still, even when it's frozen, it's pretty easy to cut with a knife. Yeah. Yep. I was telling them earlier, that used to be what I did, and now, believe it or not, I have children who will eat tomato paste out of the can. So I don't ever have any left over because I just hand them the can. They fight over it. It's so weird to me. Yeah, but they never saw me eating tomato paste. Yay!
One thing I've done is if I have any liquids that or things that I always tend to have more than what I need.
Yep.
Is if you get ice trays.
Ice cube trays, yeah.
That and then you freeze them and you pop them and then you label it this stuff. It's so easy when you're cooking next time.
Yes.
Rather than starting from.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you like the regular old school plastic ones or you prefer the silicone ice cube trays or do you have a preference?
I use both. Silicones tend to have sometimes the smaller ones, like if I want something small, but I do use the regular.
Just plain old, regular, old school plastic.
Yes, and I have to remember to close it, like if you're like doing big chunks of garlic, my husband will complain like, the garlic will get bigger and.
Do you find that they hold over the flavors at all?
They
Of what?
do.
Yeah.
So what I will do is instead of putting the actual tray cover, I
Mhm.
will actually put a saran wrap or
Yeah.
something so that it can control. It's just like, trying out different things and things.
Sure.
Some of the aromatics does have a strong flavor.
Yeah.
So, but again, like I'm thinking, I don't have to work that hard later.
Sure, I agree.
Which is my goal. Yeah, as much as I love to cook.
Yeah, I have found that sometimes my silicone ice cube trays, even if I'm just keeping water in them, take on a flavor and make the ice taste weird. And I've tried this and it works, that if you bake them, and I can't tell you this temperature or the time because I'd have to look it up on the internet, but baking the silicone trays took the funky flavor out.
And some of them, depending on the material, you can put on the top shelf of dishwasher.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because it's hard to go into each cube and clean and all that.
Sure, yeah.
I'm not doing that.
But yeah, having those leftover little bits of stuff is nice and handy.
It's easy if you do it. It's work at one time, but then you can use it at least a month, month and a half.
Yeah. All right, so if you see the bottom of this pan, you see those spices, they've gotten real crusty and brown on the bottom, and you're like, oh no, it's stuck to the bottom of the pan. It's not. We're going to release it with water. Do you guys know the name for that stuff on the bottom of the pan? It has a name. Yes, it's fond. F-O-N-D, fond. I don't know if that's a French word. All right, we're going to add 3 cups of water. So in general, with lentils, it's the crispy brown stuff on the bottom of the pan. So in general with lentils, and again, this is variable. Like, right, if you're making lentil soup versus just cooking them, it's generally about 1 to 1.5 lentils to liquid. Again, that's all variable depending on, are you making soup or are you making just a side dish of lentils? So now I can even feel it. You can't see it, but I can feel that it's smooth on the bottom of the pan now. So what we just did has another fancy cooking word. We're stirring. No. But what just happened when we pulled all the fond off the pan with liquid? Yeah, we deglazed the pan. You guys are going to impress your friends with your fancy word knowledge. Just deglazing the fond. Very fancy. Sure, yeah. I would probably tone down the salt to be careful. Unless I made the vegetable broth. Usually if I make stock at home, I often don't necessarily salt it, and then I just add the salt when I'm making whatever I'm gonna make. Oh yeah, this is getting nice. I am. That's going to be part of our next over chicken day. All right. Okay, so this is bubbling. Feel like I keep having to we're learning this stove. We're going to bring this up to a boil and then down to a simmer. That's a typical thing with grains and with beans. Bring it up to a boil and down to a simmer. Just sort of jump starts the process. I read somewhere somebody said, I just like to show those beans who's boss, right? Get it, like, I'm in control here. We're gonna boil, and then we're gonna back off a little bit. Okay, so we got that there. Let's find a little place to put this so that it's out of my way. All right, so got all that stuff going on, that stuff going on. I know. Done with this stuff. We'll move this out of the way. Actually, we'll put all this stuff over here. Because next thing we're going to do is we've now got dessert. We've got taco filling. Every now and then you want to give this a little stir. What we're going for is for a lot of this liquid, it's going to be, absorbed. So we're going to, but we want to stir every now and then, make sure everything's gotten even. So that'll hang out there. Next thing we're going to do is make let's move these down here. We're going to make our slaw. I need that for the slaw. Okay. Slaw. So you can go so many directions with this, right? This is, a way to do it. But slaws are so forgiving and flexible and a great way to use up crunchy vegetables in your vegetable crisper where you've just got odds and ends. I got that one carrot hanging out. I don't know what to do with it. That sort of thing. When we think of slaw, we often think cabbage. Does it have to have cabbage? Nope. Could have any sort of crunchy vegetables that you like. So today we are going to make this slaw with cabbage, carrot, cucumber, green onions that I didn't put in my bowl. And that might not be on the recipe, but that's what I want to be in them. That's the way we're operating today. Cilantro, I realize, is very polarizing. So, and I think I'm one of the rare people that is kind of ambivalent about my feelings towards cilantro. I feel like cilantro is like a love it or hate it. Of course, there's that genetic trait where it tastes like soap for some people, and I honor that and will not force it upon you. So we're going to use that as like a top, as like a little, that's parsley, as a strip on top of our tacos so that it's very easy to just set it to the side if that's how you're feeling today. Okay, so other thing about slaw is I like to start with whatever sort of vinaigrette situation in the bowl, and then we can add other stuff into it. So this one is so simple in that it is literally just lime juice and honey and a little salt. So when we are cooking with limes, and I thought even last night when I was cooking with limes, I was working with my daughter, and she was helping me cook last night, and I forgot to tell her to roll the limes, but you can get so much more lime juice out if you give them a little roll first. The other thing when I was teaching in grad school, in our teaching kitchen at my graduate school, that I felt like I said every single time is zest your limes or lemons or oranges first, because it is 1,000 times easier to zest this than a cut in half piece. And once you've forgotten, then you've forgotten, and now you're gonna do it, but you're gonna struggle. This is the best tool, of course. Literally was a wood rasp that some culinarian was like, we're gonna put a handle on that. And then they called it microplane, and the rest is history. But there's not a better zesting tool in all the land, because it just is so perfect at getting the oily outside flavorful part of that lime zest and not, I feel like other zesters get too much into the pith, which is bitter.
I love the way you did that in a circle. I've always gone like part.
Oh, yeah. Then I can know that that's the way I also peel oranges in a spiral. So I can be confident that I've gotten every bit I can. So yeah, it's a spiral. So also this recipe says matchstick. The vegetables, and that's fine. I find it sometimes to be a little fiddly to matchstick things. So I'm gonna probably do that with it's easier with a cucumber, but for carrots, we're just gonna pull out our good old box grater, because it's gonna go way faster, and I won't start getting bored of, I can't remember if I rolled this one, so we'll roll some extra for good measure. And come over. How you doing over here, friends? Yum. Looking good. Smelling good. It's getting there, right? It's starting to look meaty. Ooh, yeah, this is nice. This is happy. This is starting to go. You see these grains? They're starting to look real. The first word that came to my mind didn't sound attractive, so I'm going to pause and think of another word. They're looking like they're just luxuriating in that cream. That sounds nice, right? To be a rice grain luxuriating in a bath of coconut milk. I'm going to switch gears real quick. I'm going to wash my hands and put on gloves because we're doing ready-to-eat stuff next. Yeah, so, how much lime juice we get out of these limes remains to be seen. Could I measure it all out? Yeah, maybe. Is it kind of annoying to squeeze a lime into a measuring cup? For sure. So what I'm going to do is taste it as we go, see how we feel about it. I am confident in the amount. Because we're doubling this, I am confident. I have never personally encountered a situation. I've encountered, whoa, that was too much lime juice. I have never encountered a situation where I was like, that's too much lime zest. I'm sure it's possible, but. Don't you love putting on gloves with wet hands? It's the best. It's like a wet bathing suit situation. Or like pajamas after you get out of the shower and you're just like, ugh. All right, there we go. All right, so in general, I would say most standard limes, you're typically going to get 2 tablespoons or so of juice. These today, in my experience, because I made some of this earlier today for our social worker soiree, have been nice, juicy limes. I'm getting the goodie out of it, right? The other thing is if you're like, oh my gosh, I ran out of lime juice and I need more lime juice in my slaw, use lemon juice, use vinegar, use another acid. We're not adding, some slaw ingredients or slaw recipes have oil. We're not adding that here because, as you saw, the amount of olive oil I put in here was a robust amount. And I think this is just sort of a nice, crunchy foil to the more rich lentils. So it doesn't really need it. All right. That's probably a third of a cup or so, if I had to guess. So 4 tablespoons is actually a quarter of a cup. So we didn't quite get to half a cup, but we're going to see how we get when we put all the other veg in here. And then honey. Forgot the honey. I just want to whisk around here somewhere. Is it behind me? Ah, thank you. I can grab it. No, I used it for this exact thing earlier when I made it for later. All right. Again, none of this stuff when it comes to slaw do you have to be precious about it, because you're going to taste it and you're going to be, oh, it needs a little bit more of this or a little bit more of that. One thing I do like oil for, especially in vinaigrettes, is adding your oil ingredient to your measuring spoon first, and then when you put the honey in, it just slides right out. It's so nice. It's very satisfying. Yes, for sure.
I like to keep it because it doesn't crystallize in the cabinet like honey.
You know, Tupelo honey, which is a little pricier, but it is a variety of honey that is famous for not crystallizing. You guys know where Tupelo honey comes from? Yes, bees. It does come from Tupelo, Mississippi, and the Tupelo tree. It's a tree. I don't know what the tree looks like, but I have family in Mississippi. I don't know that I've ever seen a Tupelo tree. But I guess it flowers, and the bees hang out there, and it makes honey that doesn't crystallize. So that's fun. All right. All right, so we're just going to try to get this honey a little bit dissolved in the lime juice. There we go. All right, next thing I want to talk about is garlic. So we're going to go easy on the garlic. Actually, no, this is for later today. Sorry, not doing garlic in this. I'm demoing different recipes later today, so I got that in my head. Cabbage. There's a funky little spot on this bit, so we're just going to take that off. All right, so cabbage to me is pretty easy to shred up. Of course, you know, it's got this core in here and you can kind of work around it. Usually cut it in half about like that. And then, you know, kind of, if you want really sort of fine pieces, you can kind of cut so that you're making like a new angle every time. Or if you don't care that much, you can have longer shreds. You can shred this on a box grater. I find it annoying to shred cabbage on a box grater. I think it's honestly for me just as easy to cut it with a knife because of the way it's already layered. It just shreds up real nicely for you. All right, and so then we're just going to, as we prep our slaw ingredients, we're just going to get them in there to hang out, marinate. Again, you could chuck this in a food processor too if you're just really not feeling like knifing things. So thinking about slaw and other things, right? Whatever crunchy vegetables you like, you can make slaw out of. Things that I think sometimes people don't think of when you think of slaw. Starchy vegetables like sweet potato and butternut squash. You can, no, we do not want that in there. You can shred those up and make slaw, just like you would, carrot. Yeah, so we're gonna toss this a little bit, get it jump starting in there.
I like to add coleslaw to my salad, like not coleslaw, the slaw mix to my salad. I feel like I make a very good Asian salad, but I will buy the bag coleslaw mix.
Mm-hmm.
That never has enough carrots, so I buy the little.
There you go.
Too.
Yeah.
That makes my life easier.
Yeah, I mean, and if you want to buy, the bagged mix is awesome. As we're moving from cold weather into warm weather in the wintertime, I'm a big fan of roasting cabbage, so I have it around for that. To me, I enjoy a slaw or chopped salad, but I feel like making a whole head of cabbage worth of slaw is like enough to feed an army. That's a ton. So roasting it, I could easily in a day or two down a head of cabbage if it's roasted. Never roasted cabbage? Oh, it's so good. So if you cut it in big wedges, toss it on, and I sort of keep the core intact, right? So you got those slices, and olive oil, salt, pretty high oven, 400 or so degree oven, and those outside leaves are going to get real crispy and brown, and the inside are going to be real silky. Oh, yes, there you go. I don't think I've actually cooked them on the grill, but that's what I'm going to do when it's too hot in the summertime to turn my oven on. Love that we're learning from each other, inspiring each other. Because I honestly don't have I live in a very old house. There's not super great ventilation in my kitchen. I have done that, and that is awesome too. And my kids we do a lot of cauliflower because my kids will eat that, and they will not eat the cabbage. But that's okay, it's all for me. Yeah, cauliflower steaks. They have that same sort of property that when you roast cabbage. Is get that sort of like silky interior and crispy brown exterior. We like that a lot. All right, so rice pudding is looking like it's getting close to done. I'm going to taste it a little bit, see if it needs some more liquid. We want a lot of this liquid from the lentils to be soaked up. I didn't bring toasted coconut today because I forgot to tell Mike to buy it. Toasted coconut is another thing, or coconut shreds is another thing that's kind of polarizing for some people. But that could be a fun garnish. As it is, we can also just lime zest garnish. That's another thing. I really think that citrus zest is just a great source of flavor that we very often like squeeze it and chuck it away. So I really try to zest and add zest to a lot of things because I think it just has such a nice aromatic quality. It's another thing you can freeze, is citrus zest if you don't have a purpose for it right then and there. No. Sometimes it's hard to have enough of it. I've like sprinkled little piles of it in like cling film, stick it in the freezer that way. Okay, let's shred this carrot. I washed this carrot earlier. If you want to peel your carrots, go right ahead. I tend not to peel my carrots because that just feels like I made something that I'm throwing away that I don't have any reason for. But I will typically just stick my box grater right in there. You can buy pre-shredded carrots if that's your vibe or what you like. I personally think that they taste like the refrigerator no matter what. I also just kind of like the kind of more feathery texture of a box grated shred rather than the hard crunch, but that's completely a personal preference. You could do this entirely with carrots, right? You could do a full carrot shred, right? Sort of going after like a Moroccan style carrot salad. What other crunchy vegetables? I mean, you get celery. I mean, so many things you can shred up. We're going to be real careful getting down here to the end so that we don't shred anybody's fingers or gloves. Just take this a little bit. All right. And get all of that incorporated in there. All right. Then we're going to taste our other stuff. There's just regular tasting spoons. Aha! No. Yes. A fork. It's fine. Okay. All right. We're going to add I'm going to add just a little bit more liquid to this. I think actually what was in that oat milk container was not as much as the full 5 cups. I'm going to add another half a cup or so. Again, your rice pudding texture and consistency is very personal preference. You do you, whatever makes you happy. And then I'm only going to add 1 cup of this coconut cream. How you doing, lentils? You guys talk to your food, or is that just me? Yum. All right, we're going to get back to, yeah, I really do have to watch out for that. I was warned about this corner. I haven't hit myself yet, but I'm like feeling real close. All right. Oh, yeah, that's going to be good. All right, one thing that I forgot to add to this that I'm just going to add a little bit to just to sort of balance out the flavors is a couple of pinches of salt. Really kind of a personal preference, but and if you're salt sensitive or concerned about salt, definitely not a requirement. Okay. But salt kind of makes things taste more like itself, is what you want your goal with salt to be. And I tend to find that, the more you cook from scratch at home, the more you have control over the amount of salt. And then also this lime juice is just gonna wake it all right up and balance out the sweetness. You guys familiar with that cookbook, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat? Here we are. You want to balance out all of those things. Maybe don't put some carrot in there. All right. Yum. All right. So lentils are looking good. All we have to do now is just finish them with our last little bits of flavor and texture. So we have our slaw. Yum. So again, lentils are real starchy. We've added the mushrooms here for some chew. And then just to have another textural element, we've got walnuts and sun-dried tomatoes. And then nutritional yeast is the other thing we're going to finish with. Has anybody cooked with nutritional yeast before? It's a byproduct of beer brewing, believe it or not. A great source of vitamin B12 for people who are needing a B12 source if you're eating mostly plant-based. And so, because I'm doubling here, that's actually right about a half a cup right there. Is there any, should have asked before if there was any allergies, because now there's nuts in there. And then add our sun-dried tomatoes. So nutritional yeast is another one of those things, right, that are going to add savory sort of umami flavors. Sun-dried tomatoes, mushrooms, nutritional yeast, all these things are really high in glutamates, which is just a kind of amino acid. All right, we'll do 2 tablespoons of this, and then we will taste and adjust. Can you grab me one more fork or spoon, please? And we just want to stir all of this in. Thank you. Yes. Yes, we like all of that chew and texture and good flavor. Awesome. Should we make some tacos? All right. No, we made another batch for them. We do have to save some rice pudding for them. But we made another batch for them this morning. If there happens to be any, so no stress. Eat your fill. Okay, so should we want to do an assembly line situation? Here, let me get this out of the way. All right, so let me put on some gloves, and I'll just sort of show you amounts for first one, and then we can go from there. Ooh, I wonder if even, yeah, let me just put on some gloves. There's a towel, brown towel right behind you. I don't know where paper towels are. Yeah, it's a whole nother level of adventure when you're cooking in a space you've never cooked in before. But now I know, right? All right, so we're going to reverse.
You tell me if you're in charge.
Like I want to swap these, but I don't want to put this on the heat. Oh, let's turn all this off. Or did that turn it on or off? Is that off?
I don't know. It sounds like it's yelling hot.
Well, I mean, it's going to be hot for a while. But we want to go lentils first, slaw next, and then a little, you could probably start doing the, yeah, yeah.
How much? That much?
Sure. So, all right, so. You could certainly do this as nachos. You could do this with soft tacos. I remember Chef Mike once telling me that he wants to bring the hard taco back into popularity. There you go, ready to go.
You want to bring a pudding with him, Christy? Sorry? Any Christy, you want to bring a taco and then, what's it called, pudding? Yeah.
The rice pudding. You do you.
Actually, yeah, if you want to.
You are grown-up individuals, and if you want to eat dessert first, I say.
Everyone ignore you, Christy. Did you do coconut cream and coconut
I
milk?
did.
What's the difference?
So coconut, it's basically the same as like milk versus heavy cream, right? So it separates out, right? And they basically just took, you know, in your can of coconut milk, how the cream rises to the top? They just take that and put it in a can without as much of the liquid. So it's just a little bit more rich. It's higher fat.
Is there a brand of nutritional teaspoon available?
I have not. I buy whatever is available at the store. I've used Bragg's before and it's fine. I live in Decatur, so I'm close to DeKalb Farmers Market, so they even like package it up in a container that doesn't have a brand on it. So I don't know that I've ever side by side or like tasted a difference in them. Now I'm curious to taste and see if there's.
I've never tried it. It's been on my list of things to try.
Yeah, so if you want to kind of get to know it, a popular way to experiment with it is to put it on popcorn. To sprinkle it on popcorn. Oh, yay! We love that.
Oh, you are eating dessert first. Oh, yeah. I love it. Thank you.
Nutritional yeast. Yeah, it's just a real savory flavor without adding a lot of salt. It doesn't really have salt.
Flavor.
Yeah, it's great. People will say it has kind of a cheesy quality, and I will say it has a cheesy quality. I'm not going to tell you it tastes like cheese. But it's got that kind of, like if you were to sprinkle Parmesan cheese on your popcorn.
Okay, I'll do the coleslaw part.
Yeah.
Try to do it.
You got it, girl. I love that like quiet sound of a room full of people crunching on tacos. That's amazing.
Thank you for joining Cancer Support Community Atlanta for this program. If you're interested in other live or recorded programs, please visit the online program tab of our website, cscatlanta.org, or follow us on Facebook. We'll be sharing additional information on upcoming programs.